Philipp is the person we didn't get an introduction to, and I think we're absolutely thrilled that Philipp is here. Philipp is a scientist working in data, working in aging specifically, but is working for a very small little family company called Nestle, which I think is a really interesting, while we talk about outreach, is a really interesting addition to this conference. So I'm just going to ask you to do like rapid answers so we can cover some ground. Again, apologies. If I could start over here and ask, how do you think the last 2 or 3 years has been in terms of outreach in this field?
Well, I think it's been great. I mean, people are definitely getting it. There's a long way to go. I have to say that sort of anecdotally, when I started on this, I heard the term snake oil a lot. And it was really annoying, but I heard it a lot. Don't hear it very much anymore, but I am worried that we'll start hearing it again as more people come into the sector that aren't thinking about it as deeply as some of the people in the room here today.
Mark?
It's definitely sped up, but I don't think it can go fast enough. I mean, yeah, time goes by faster than you expect. I've been working in this industry for like 18 years, and we've gone from having 0 longevity therapies to 0 longevity therapies.
Max?
Yeah, I think now more organizations that will be the foundation for like this outreach and propaganda effort that we have are like being built, like ODBL and I think VitaDAO were like 2-3 years old. I think Phil is a bit older lifespan, who is not here today. They're also like already 10 years old. So I think now we have at least like a good cater of like people that can speak to people and go to other conferences and not always talk to the same people. And I mean, the media is picking it up more as well, right? Even like in Germany, you have like magazines now writing about certain things that are happening in the longevity space. So I think it's going in the right direction at least.
Super. Philipp?
Yeah, well, I think the community is doing great. I mean, just look at the room. You know, we have doctors, we have people from finance, we have scientists, we have politicians. It's amazing. And I think the community, maybe the risk is a little bit that we're preaching to the choir. And I think the big challenge is what Phil presented, to go now from the innovators, or some of them are biohackers, to the early adopters. And how do we get now into the early majority? I think this is at least what we, of course, think about as a small company.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think that things are getting a lot better, and we're seeing a lot more expanse of the information to the public, again, outside of the more insular groups. And I think it needs to move more quickly, and I think we have to be really careful about our messaging. We need to make sure that we're not siloing. You don't have to like one therapy over another. We need to talk about all of the therapies, and not, I think we need all of the therapies. In order to cure aging, we need like everything that we saw during these last few days and more. And so making sure that that message is out there is important. But we're seeing the first character assassinations in the last couple of years in our industry as well, going out to the public. And I think that it's really important that the people inside our groups respond to that, and don't work towards those character assassinations, because this is going to disrupt huge industries. So actually, I think that those are a good sign, even though they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, and just if I can follow on with you from that, because I think it relates somewhat to what Phil was saying as well. On this really difficult balance between the snake oil, message getting out there, and then over-dampening a hype that doesn't really exist yet. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be a brief answer, so sorry for such a difficult question, but how would you suggest we try to walk that tightrope?
Well, I think that, the most important thing is that we get human data out there, and that, we ensure that the correct information is hitting the media and the public. There is actually a lot to be excited about. Mm-hmm. There is a lot happening in the medical tourism zone, as I spoke about, and even in animal models and moving towards clinical trials, that we really need to get people behind. So we need to, I have a real problem when I go to read someone's book and they start talking about, there are the charlatans, and then there's me. I think that we have to get away from that. We have to stop talking about the charlatans. We have to stop talking about the snake oil and stick with the science, and I think that it would actually do us more good than harm. When we try to qualify ourselves by disqualifying someone else, we're making a huge mistake. So, we have to make sure that our messaging is direct. When the media does come to us, that we answer succinctly, and then we have to hope for the best, because then they're still going to do what they're going to do.
Very nice.
I mean, it's entertainment.
Philip?
No, good science will prevail. If you go out with like finding something new in one mouse study, of course you can go on Amazon, you can sell it, but it will not prevail. And I think the big advantage that we have is the community. So if you think, for example, like supplements like urolithin A, and Brian was talking about it, you can actually reach out to the community and get validation from labs around the world. And also, longevity clinics, I think, will have a very major impact because they can start testing. So it becomes really a community effort to bring the science behind the products.
Max?
Yeah, I think, that's the thing with science. Most of science is probably noise, right? And we need those few therapies that are not noise, right? And I think the cancer field has similar issues, but still they don't get a backlash for it, right? Every few years you get a new study that is like all over the media and say, well, we found the cure for cancer, right? And then probably the next 50 years we will have like more of those studies that will be advertised as cure for cancer and won't get there, right? And I think maybe that's almost like a sign of maturation of the field, that we sometimes have those dialogues now in the longevity and the aging field as well, that, there's like those new molecules that do like something in a cell line, and a upcoming journalist grabs it and makes it as this huge story, right? And at least that way people hear more about it, and I think, sure, we as scientists are more critical of our colleagues, and we should be, right? But I think the general population, for them, it's more like almost entertainment. They think about it, and then the next entertainment part comes up, and the next story, and the next Kardashian, or the next war. And so that way it just goes forward. I wouldn't be too distracted by that.
Nice. Mark?
I think it's very abstract for most people, the stuff that we're talking about here. So I'm excited by obviously our organization is focusing on the maximum lifespan research and technology development, but for engaging the public, I think making it tangible. So like if we can have tech-enabled longevity services for people that are affordable for most people, that would make it real for them, and that would be engaging. So I'm excited to see some of that. Like this, if it costs even $100,000, is still way beyond what most people can afford. So.
Well, I think reflecting Mark's slide about bottlenecks, biomarkers are very, very important. I think once the industry aligns around a standardized biomarker set, which might be more than one individual test, and like the cure for cancer, people can say with confidence they've got a cure for aging, or at least a cure for slowing down aging. I think that will help the industry coalesce around its proof point to itself. And we'll call out other organizations that are over-claiming, because that's the risk that obviously people have got, we've got as an industry. But I'm delighted to say that it's happening. The stuff that's going on at the Buck, they're questioning some of the previous work that's being done. They're not pulling it down, but they're just questioning it. And I do feel, as I talked about in my presentation, that we'll get there relatively quickly now. I think over the next 2-3 years, we'll be able to see organizations validating their statements with an industry standard that's backed up by experts. So the likes of Nestle, who are going to be out there in stores, they can make claims that are actually direct claims as opposed to inferred claims of longevity.
Who's this?
It's a small family business.
Oh, I believe it, yeah. So without trying to keep it abstract and complex for too long more, but Max's point on cancer, I think, is a very interesting one, that the claims, the money, everything else is something that I think aging would strive to have, that money at least, and certainly to have as much research and as much development, but it isn't held to the same standard. So on the psychological switch there between, everyone wants to cure cancer, it's a very emotionally kind of appealing thing. Most people don't want to cure aging. So where would you sit, each of you, on the the dressing this up as actually what we're trying to do is just move back up from diseases and be preventive? Or do you want to be open and honest and say, that's the same thing as curing aging, we want to cure aging?
Well, I mean, we don't count cancer in our data because it's such a big outlier. If we're trying to put a data set together about the size of the industry, if we had cancer in there, of course, we could make it sound very big. Yeah. So we don't put cancer in there. Of course, it is in parts a disease of aging. But I think that really what we're seeing is that people are getting the vocabulary and the pitch right. I think that you go back to Ricardo's presentation on In Silico on the first day, whether it's somebody's chosen a target as a disease of aging, or they're working on the underlying drivers that are going to affect age, the vocabulary and the pitch is going to happen. And I feel very excited about it. And it's been one of those things that we've struggled with right from the beginning. You know, what's aging, what's not aging. You know, and we've got it wrong a few times, but we're pretty clear now what the lines of demarcation are, and the industry's getting it. And when the medical community start to understand it as well, and policymakers. And I think that, you know, the skinny jab's, for me, a great example of a government getting behind millions of people to try and get a preventative therapy in there, because they're looking to support diabetes in 20 years down the line. And I feel that people will get it. It's just a matter of time, but it's coming.
Mark, if I can just put a little bit of a caveat for your response to that. Like, to me, it has always struck me that as well as the scientists, the superstars of the field, we need people like marketing experts. So have you found through the LBF that you're bringing in people that are helping to solve issues other than just the science in terms of outreach?
Yeah, that's actually one of the fun parts about the community is we have people making documentaries, making movies, running organizations like the Save Forever, Lifespan, their efforts. I think we have to like present more of like a utopian vision. I think one of the things we have to overcome is most people think that the future is going to be worse than the present, actually, in my experience. When you get, like, that's the underlying reason why they're skeptical. And so just talking about diseases rather than lifespan is like sort of like a toned down level of ambition, because they just aren't expecting the future to be that great. And that's like a kind of a larger problem than just the longevity community. But that's like a lot of different industries face that problem, I think. Yeah, so trying to present a utopian vision of the future is... Yeah.
Max, you gave us the cancer analogy. Do you want to help get us out of the hole?
So here's the thing which I think we should actually be talking more about rejuvenation than we should be talking about longevity and aging biology. Because longevity is super ambiguous, right? I think 4 years ago it was like still on par with that is aging biology. Now cancer is becoming longevity. Now a lot of other things are becoming longevity because it's not precise, right? Even like aging biology, people can fight what it means, right? Where does it start? But I think if we talk about rejuvenation, it's precise. There's like more like endpoints of, well, you make something younger, right? That's probably also like not then directly living forever and other things. It's like, well, I would like to be younger. Unless you're 18, you probably want to be, or if you're below 18, you want to be older. And if you're like over 50, you want to be younger or something like that, right? And I think that's a much more precise term that we probably should be using more often.
Philipp?
Yeah, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is, like, if you think of, like, we need the good biomarker, this is correct. I mean, if we have the biomarker that is the equivalent of high cholesterol, and we know how to intervene and what's the risk, that's great. Now, what we have to keep in mind, like, only a small portion of people are actually numbers driven. You know, the vast majority actually is driven by many other things, including emotions. And, you know, I like your example with the skinny jab or Wegovy. Now the big question is, like, what do you do once you stop the jab? And in many countries, actually, the insurances, they stop paying once you are under BMI of 30. And so what's next? And you know, no treatment, whatever, if it's a drug or if it's a supplement or it's something else, it will not be effective if people don't swallow it, right? And you can extend this actually to lifestyle. You can subscribe to a gym. If you don't go, it will not work. So I think what the field is maybe missing a little bit is, like, how you drive behavior change, positive behavior change. And that's a big field in itself, and a lot of it comes back from not talking it in a negative way, cure disease or prevent disease, but how do we turn this actually into a lifestyle and wellness choice that people, once they have lost weight with the help of a drug, that they then start thinking, okay, how can I do things differently?
Super. Liz?
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, actually, it seems like the things have kind of melded as we've come around. It's almost like the whisper in the ear. The things I want to say change, but I'll speak really quickly to it. I think that we have to be careful not to get stuck on semantics. How we're going to reach different people is going to be a different message. And so worrying about whether aging is a disease or not, I think that it is. I'll stick with that because in the future, when we cure aging, people then will certainly agree that it was a disease. But I try not to get stuck on semantics because I think that it turns people off. I don't want to message a specific way. I want to message broadly to reach everyone that I can. And when we're talking about lifestyle, that's absolutely it. And Mark is absolutely on spot. We actually have to help people project themselves into the future. When you talk about curing aging or people living a long time, people immediately hit a roadblock because they're not able to project themselves into the future. And when I ran into this technology looking for cures for kids, which is where I started, I didn't get it immediately either. Now, you know, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a whatever, maybe not a lawyer, but I want to be many things. And I have this sort of unlimited mindset that I didn't have before because before life was limited and I fought for my limits, and I no longer do that. And helping the general public not fight for their limits would be a radical change in helping them open their mind. And so having that projected future, if people can't project themselves into the things that they want to do in the next 30 years, they really are going to hit a super wall. And as far as the cancer, you know, I just had a stream on my Facebook the other day, and it's someone who is connected to me whom I don't know, and they showed a scan of their body 5 years ago. It's very emotional. She was full of cancer in her brain, her lungs, everywhere. She took a CAR T therapy. 5 years later, has no signs of cancer in her body, and she put as the title, they still say there isn't a cure. So there isn't a cure for all cancers, but in studies and research and in human data, we have found curative medicine. It's just still not regulated to the general public. So there are a lot of great things coming. So it's not that the industry has stopped. There are things coming. It just needs enormous amount of money behind it to get there.
Super. Okay, so because we literally only have a couple of minutes, I'm going to just leave a final thought. You're made king of whatever domain you wish for a day to change whatever law or whatever policy you want. So you can only do one. What would you do? Start here, or we can start here actually, Philipp.
I'll start because, I mean, that was what my whole presentation about. It's the pre-regulatory route, giving people access to new and innovative drugs, making it legal for doctors to treat and patients to get access, making sure that when we have an innovation in a lab, in a university, in a biotech company, that it translates to humans that most greatly need it at that moment, even if we think the outcome might be poor because they're end of life, and moving them back towards preventative medicine.
Brilliant. King Philipp?
Well, so just a number, like in the US, the yearly spending on drugs is 3.7 trillion. The total spending for food, including restaurants, you know, your daily food, supermarkets, is half of it. So if I could change something, actually, I would stop spending so much on drugs and give everyone fresh, whole grain food for free for the entire families, and I think it would change our healthcare system dramatically.
Max?
Yeah, I actually want to go in a similar direction. If we could just force big food to produce real foods and not all those chemically infested products that they produce, I think that might actually help living healthier, longer lives as well. So maybe just finding a way back to what we should eat, what is healthy, what our grandmothers ate, might be the right way to go.
Brilliant. Mark?
I mean, if I'm going to fantasize, I'd like an NIH-sized agency that was focused on technology development. So not on just applying or basic research, but developing new modalities, new technologies that are healthcare focused.
Nice.
I would publish biological age data for the public population, so the whole country would know whether, on average, the average citizen is ahead of or behind their biological age, so that people really start to understand the concept of what we're talking about as an industry.
Very nice. Okay, that's brilliant. Sorry, guys, we're out of time, so if we could just give a round of applause for our panelists. Can I?